We have a lot to get to today. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan, Reuben, Frank, Dave, Zangaro. O-line, the defensive strategy, Kenny Gainwell, Miles Sanders, Fletcher Cox's role, matchups against Carolina. We have a lot to get to. So let's kind of dive right into it first. Lane Johnson misses another practice on Thursday. It's starting to look like he's not going to play on Sunday.
Wait a minute. Usually you introduce the show, and then you go to me for a comment, and then I go back to you, and then you start the show. And I feel left out, like I didn't get to do my little stupid, comment at the top of the show.
Yeah, but sometimes you forget we do that, and then like 3 minutes in, I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, it's just Eagle Eye.
That's fair. Yeah, Lane. I can't imagine Lane's going to play at this point. He's missed first two practices. There's a shorter practice Friday, even if he's there, and we don't know. I can't imagine he's going to play. So, yeah, so they have some options they do have really good depth on the O-line, and they need every bit of it right now. I mean, we're seeing that. And we talked on Tuesday about, just how well they held up. But I think we will see. I think there's a good chance we'll see Mulata. Now, Mulata's back, so I think we might see him at right tackle. And he started one game there. He could play either side. I wouldn't worry about that. I think we'll see Driscoll at right guard. He's never started. He's never played guard in the NFL, but when he got here as a rookie last year, we kind of thought of him more as a guard than a tackle. He's played well at tackle. And then Landon Dickerson played better at left guard than he did at right guard. It could have just been that it was his third start. He doesn't say very much, but he seemed to be a little happier with how he played. We spoke to him before practice on Thursday. And Dillard starts again at left tackle. So I don't know how many teams could lose 4 starting offensive linemen and be this equipped to put a decent group of 5 out there. But it's an area that, these guys are the future. So we're seeing that a little bit early.
Yeah, they're only down to missing 3 offensive linemen.
Right.
If my line is back, still.
But I'm saying, you look at the Chiefs game; they scored 30 points, 461
yards.
Yeah,
I know what you're saying. Yeah. No, I'm just teasing you a little bit, but and it makes sense. We know that Dillard struggled a couple years ago flipping sides. So if he's more comfortable at left tackle, I think there's more comfort with Mulata being at right tackle than there is Dillard being a right tackle, even though they've really played it around the same amount of time. But yeah, I think that makes the most sense. And Dillard's been playing pretty well at left tackle. You probably don't want to mess up that spot. So yeah, that's probably their best bet without Lane. Now, if Mulata can't play, then you're probably looking at the line we saw at the end of that game, or really that whole game against the Chiefs. You had Driscoll at right tackle, Nate Herbig at right guard, and then the left side stays the same. So they have some options. You're right. They're in a better spot than most teams to deal with these injuries and now missing Lane. But still not ideal. They're obviously a better team with Lane Johnson on the field.
Yeah, I think that's true with a healthy 100% Lane Johnson. That's true. But I think Driscoll is an interesting. And it's funny to me how the guy that can play either tackle spot is the guy who never played football before, is a rugby player and never played organized football, and he can go to either side. And the guy who's a first-round pick and has played football his life, he's the left tackle who can't swing over to the right. And I wonder how much of that is, Mulata. When you look at him, he never had a chance to develop any biases like that, like I'm a left tackle, because he wasn't even a football player. So. Well, it's an interesting thing. He's got that flexibility to start at.
I don't think it's like a mental bias. I think it's just there's so much muscle memory to break for Dillard, and even Jeff Stalin even talked about it when a couple weeks ago when he finally talked to us. He was asked about that. Is it easier in a way for Jordan to flip sides because Andre Dillard's played left tackle his whole life, so. Yes, he knows football better, but he only knows that position. And as much as we kind of rolled our eyes when he talked about writing an essay with the other hand, there's some validity to it. It is difficult, and it's probably in a weird way more difficult given that he's played left tackle his whole life.
Yeah, it's true. But when's the last time anyone actually wrote an essay with their, like, in longhand? Like, I mean, I think most college students have laptops.
Yeah, I would think so.
But anyway, that's a question for another day. I do think that the fact that, they've got some. I mean, look, Sam Al's not coming back. We saw him going out to his car on one of those rollers. What do you call them? The
rollabout.
Rollabout, yeah. With his knee immobilized. You feel for that kid. But with each passing week, we don't know how long Dillard will be at left tackle, but I would expect a little more cohesion and get to play again. But again, the right side could be very different. So, gosh, I looked it up. I think last year they used 14 different starting O-lines, and this will be the fourth. So it'll be their 18th in 21 games, 18th different starting line in 21 games, which is, I was gonna message you and ask if you could name the one O-line that started back-to-back games last year. But
I bet I could with some thought. It was like 3/4 of the way through the season, right?
Yes.
It would have been. All right, so you would have had to be Mailata at left tackle.
Yeah.
Man. I don't know if I can do it.
It was Mailata, Sam Malu, Kelsey, Herbig, and Matt Pryor.
Oh, Matt Pryor. Gosh.
I know.
Yeah, I was thinking because Sam Malu would have had to be back by then.
Yeah.
So you have Herbie. Man, it's been a mess though. It's crazy, and it's like, and I see people getting frustrated with the Lane situation. That is what it is. We don't even know what it is yet, but it's not an injury. It's just unfortunate. We don't really have any other details for you guys. I know people keep asking. All we know is that he went back to Oklahoma for a personal matter. He's back in Philadelphia, but hasn't been at practice. So we don't really have a sense even of how long he'll miss. So, but if he does need to miss extended time, I think then it makes even more sense to move Mailata to right tackle. And because if you think Lane's coming back soon, then you can probably get by with Dillard at right tackle. But if this is going to be an extended thing, and who knows, maybe it is, then it probably makes some sense to say, hey, well, these are our two best tackles. We need them on the field. They're better in this configuration, so we're going to go with that.
Yeah, and I've seen some people expressing frustration with Lane, and I would just say Lane would not do this if it wasn't the right thing to do for him. And I mean, he's a competitor. He hates missing games, but he knows. I mean, he knows what's best at this point for whatever's going on. He would not do this lightly. I know that. I mean, this isn't, and again, I'm glad it hasn't gotten out. I'm glad nobody's leaked it, because it's a personal, private thing. And if Lane at some point, cares to tell us what's going on, that's up to him. But my only thing about Lane is I just hope everyone's okay. Hope he's okay. His family's okay. And, hope he can get back on the playing field soon.
Yeah. And until he does, you're right. Jeff Stoutland is, we praise him all the time, but he deserves so much credit for having these guys ready to play. And it's become a necessity over the last couple of years, but this is the way he always handled it. And there are some, and I go back to this all the time. A lot of people think the coaches in the NFL are good coaches because they're in the NFL. And that's not the case. I mean, there are some coaches who don't belong in the NFL and they're here. So, it's true. It really is true. And it's fun talking to some offensive linemen who have played elsewhere, and then they come here and they realize the way it should be, or at least the peak of it, because Jeff Stoutland doesn't ignore any lineman. I think there are a lot of coaches who, at any position, kind of focus on their starters, and I don't want to say neglect the backups, but don't spend as much time with the backups. Stout and Roy Isman are coaching those backups a ton, even the guys on the practice squad, because you don't know. And another guy we haven't talked about, Reuben Clark, he's been restored to the practice squad, so he could now be an elevation. That wouldn't surprise me this week, given the uncertainty at the position.
Yeah, he was on the practice squad injured list, I believe, which I'd never heard of, but there he was. We don't even know what the injury was. I have no idea. Unless he shows up and the injury report is limited with that injury, then we'll find out. But I think the thing about Stoutland I really admire is he really gets these guys prepared for anything, and mentally, like as well as physically. And we were talking to Jack Driscoll on Wednesday, and he said, we will get reps. If you're a guard, you're going to get reps at center. You just will. You'll feel comfortable there, and you're going to play next to all the guards. At some point, you're going to get reps next to each guard. And when it comes up in the game, you're not starting from nowhere. You're not starting from scratch. You've got a comfort level. Whether it's Sua or Herbig or whoever, you've played next to that guy at some point. You've practiced next to him. And so I think the physical part, but just mentally, and you can understand why. After the way last year went, you can understand why Stout's philosophy is that these guys have to be ready. And Jack said Stout came up to him and Herbig before the game, before the Chiefs game, and just said, you're ready for this. Just play hard, and just kept it really simple. And they did, and they really believe that they're ready with limited snaps. And we asked Jack what his mentality was, because he had practiced at guard all week, not knowing Lane wasn't going to play. He said Stout told him, "You're playing right tackle." He said, "Yeah, I played right tackle before. I'm ready. Let's just do it." He said there was no nervousness, there was no indecision, there was no questioning himself or wondering if he'd do it, because Stout had it prepared.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
I mean, and it's, as much as he hasn't prepared, it's still not ideal to find out 2 hours before a game, because you miss all the film study time of like really learning what that edge rusher does or what those edge rushers do. So it puts you at a disadvantage, but you credit them with how well they've handled it. And it was funny, we asked Nate Herbig how Stout delivered the news to him that he was playing last week, and Nate just said, "You're up." And that's what he said, "You're up," and they went from there. So still not an ideal situation, but this week at least they can be prepared to not have Lane. They can be prepared for really, if you have an injury, at least there's a chance maybe an ankle swells up like it did with Lane last year, or there's a chance. But something out of the blue, personal matter, you really have no inkling. So I give them even more credit for playing the way they did.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
All right, let's talk about the defense. Alex Singleton went through some philosophical defensive stuff, and I found it really interesting. I'll let you expand on it a little bit, but the gist was basically, our defense against Kansas City was designed to make them drive the field, and then they did it. Our defense was predicated on I think he said, if you drive 9, 10, 11 play drives are tough for offenses, and eventually you just have to make plays as a defensive player, and they didn't do that. But it seems like, at least from a philosophical standpoint, they did kind of what they wanted to.
So now you're going to let me explain it, that what you just explained?
Well, there's more than that.
There is more, but you kind of covered it, and it made sense. And he said, to do that, you've got to make plays, especially on third down, and we didn't do that. And for the most part, they kept the ball in front of them. They didn't really get hurt till at the very end by a big play. But I think, the thing he said, if Pat Mahomes is that efficient, and like all their drives were, they had like all these 9 plays, 75 yards, 8 plays, 77 yards. All their drives were precision drives that way. And that was the goal, was to, the philosophy is, if you make a team drive 10 plays, at some point there's a better chance they're going to screw up than if it's a 2 or 3 play drive, and that somebody can make a play, that somebody can knock the ball down on third down, get an interception, get a sack on third down. They didn't do that, and to make that approach work, you have to make plays on third down. I mean, the Chiefs had the second highest third down conversion percentage in NFL history since the stats been kept in 1991, since it was first kept. So I understand the philosophy. I mean, look, there's no easy, simple, infallible way to stop Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs. And I thought as game plans go, it makes sense. Try to make them drive 10, 12 plays and make a play at some point on that drive. They got the long drive part down, the long 10, 12 play drive thing, but they just didn't make the plays. And part of that is Mahomes is just so good. And part of it is that they just don't have playmakers. It's
yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Against Mahomes, any team's going to have trouble doing it. But, man, the lack of playmakers this defense has right now, it's going to be tough to sit back and let teams do that to you, because I don't know how consistently they're going to be able to make plays. And look, it's an extreme when you're facing an offense that's that good. And I think that's fair to point out. But, I mean, who are their playmakers on defense? It's Hargrave and Sweat occasionally.
Yeah. And
they have other guys who are capable. I think Rodney McLeod, if he's healthy, is capable of making plays. Darius Slay is capable of making plays. Their linebackers aren't.
What does he have? One interception in 20 games as an Eagle. So, yeah, it's I think philosophically it makes sense, but if you don't have those kind of players, Pat Mahomes he's gonna eat you alive. I mean, basically what Singleton said was, if you have no chance to win if you can't make those plays, he's gonna beat you. He's gonna find a way. And they didn't make those plays, and he beat them.
Yeah, to me, it gets back to the linebacker position. I don't think they have the player. I don't think that based on what we've seen Gannon do, they have the players, not even the playmakers, the players to fit a lot, which is so strange to me because he talked all off season about wanting to design his defense around his players and to be multiple. But a lot of what we've seen doesn't seem to mesh with what he has.
Yeah, and I know people were wondering about, what he said about playing dime. I mean, we're going to put out there in dime. So
Marcus Epps.
Well,
you're already playing him. Zach McPherson.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, tells you that they're not ready, or that he doesn't believe that's going to give him the best chance to get stops in those situations. So.
Yeah, I mean, I question it.
It comes down to talent with this defense, and I think Gannon's a good coach. I still believe that. They don't have players, and when you lose one of your few, above average, and I think BG is well above average, but when you lose one of your few above average guys, not a whole lot left.
Yeah, you're right, and we'll talk about Fletcher in a minute, but the Fletcher Cox thing is something to follow.
Yeah, I'm just thinking how they have 2 takeaways and 5 sacks, 5-6 sacks. Hargrove has 5 sacks and one of the 2 takeaways.
Yeah.
So when you look at the defense's big plays, most of them are Hargrave. Eric Wilson had an interception in an otherwise terrible game that he played.
And that was a Josh Sweat pressure.
That was a Josh Sweat pressure. Sweat has 1.5 sacks, I think, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So other than Sweat and Hargrave, has anybody, I mean, and Eric Wilson has a pick, but.
Well, Ridgeway in the opener, haven't seen him since.
Who's that?
Ridgeway in the opener.
Ridgeway. Yeah. Yeah, he had a great matchup in that game, but obviously hasn't done anything since. So there's a lot of players on this team that just aren't making plays. And that's been the case with this defense for a few years now. And, the Super Bowl year, they had guys that made plays, whether it was, Darby or P. Rob or, Kendricks or Bradham. Jalen Mills made plays that year. They had Fletcher was a beast that year. They had a lot of guys making big plays. Derek Barnett was a better player than he is now somehow. So you need that. You need that at all levels. You just don't have it. And I mean, I'm not going to get into a whole drafting thing, but that's where it traces its roots. Hey, score big with the AAA Eagles MVP membership, along with the superb roadside assistance discounts you've come to expect from AAA. Get exclusive Eagles-related perks. For all the details, visit AAA.com/Eagles.
So something interesting happened this week. We got a chance to talk to Fletcher Cox, who through 4 games has 5 total tackles, no sacks, no tackles for loss, no forced fumbles, no anything. And it seemed like he didn't want to come out and just say it, but he kind of blamed scheme a little bit.
He did. He said he's moving around. It doesn't give him a chance to settle in. I think it was his quote. You know, he kind of, I mean, look, he talked about, I got to make the best of it. He talked about the way he's being used. I got to make the best of it. I'm a professional. I'm just going to do what the coaches ask me and make the best of it. So it was kind of veiled, thinly veiled, you know, commentary on how he's being used. And look, it kind of rang hollow to me, honestly. He's just not playing well. He's just not, I mean, gosh, he's moved around his whole career. I mean, he's lined up in a lot of different places, and he's made plays consistently for a decade or for 8-9 years. So we'll see. We'll see if, you know, there's been we talked to him after we talked to Gannon, so we couldn't really get his reaction to it, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on, because they need Fletcher Cox. Look, this can't be it can't be a good defense. Forget great. It can't be a good defense without contributions from Fletcher Cox. I mean, he's, you know, when you're paying a guy that much money, I mean, he basically has to produce, and he isn't. So we'll see if they start using him differently, but sounded very frustrated to me.
Yeah, and look, he has to play better no matter where they play him. But I think there is something to the idea of if he feels like he's out of position and he's your best player, or he's supposed to be your best player, maybe there's something to it to think about playing him at the 3 technique more. And it's, you know, we definitely sense some frustration, and I wonder if it's not just about the multiple positions, which is what he brought up. That's what he said. He said, you know, they're making him play the 3 technique and the 4-eye, which is basically, you know, an end in the 3-4, as opposed to playing a tackle in the 4-3, because they do have the 3-man fronts. But aside from that, like, this defense is just not nearly as aggressive. They don't let them get upfield. And from a defensive lineman standpoint, you get why D linemen like to play in Jim Schwartz's defense, because you're not reacting. You're getting up the field, you're getting after the quarterback, and you're tackling the running back on the way. It's more fun. It creates an opportunity for you to get more sacks. And now if you're asked to do different things, I get why there's some hesitation. So I think that it's not like one thing or the other. It'll be easy to say, man, Fletcher, be quiet and just start to produce more. And it would be easy to say, whoa, he's out of position. What do you want him to do? I think the real answer is somewhere in between. I think he clearly needs to be better than he's been, but I also wonder if Gannon's utilizing the guy who's supposed to be his best player correctly.
Yeah, I think it is a little of both, and that's why I think it'll be interesting to see, even starting Sunday afternoon in Charlotte, just how his role changes, if at all, because you know that Tracy Rocker and Jonathan Gannon and Fletcher Cox have had this conversation. I mean, Fletcher's not the kind of guy to just sit idly by and not speak up if he doesn't feel like he's being used to the best of ability. I mean, Jonathan Gannon sees those goose eggs every week, 3 of the 4 weeks. Also, Fletcher had 4 tackles and mysteriously increased to 5. On Tuesday he had 4, and by Wednesday he had 5. So somebody's fudging the stats a little bit, but yeah, I would agree. He's got to be better, and JG's got to be better finding ways to use him. Look, there's a chance he's just. I mean, every player.
Oh, Fletcher just got another tackle. He's up to 6.
there's a point in everyone's career that they just aren't the same player, and there's no shame in it. It happens. It's human. You know, they're human beings, and physically they go through a lot. And I mean,
Fletcher's played a ton.
He's played a ton of snaps, ton of games.
Played a ton through injuries in his career.
And he's had, over the last, 4 or 5 years, he's had some serious injuries, and they take a toll. They have a cumulative effect. He's not the guy he used to be. I don't think any of us know what his ceiling is at this point, but I do think it's higher than he's showing. And I think JG's got to figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder too. We talked about the Graham injury hurting the run defense. It's probably putting Fletcher out of position a little bit more at times too, because you need someone in that 4-eye position. And I think Graham probably could have done a little bit of that. It's a tricky thing, but they need more from Fletcher Cox. It's just the bottom line. And it's not enough for him to demand double teams. It's not enough to say, and that was it. A few weeks into the season, you can get away with that. You can say, yeah, but he's getting doubled, and Hargrave had a one-on-one, and he won that matchup because Fletcher was doubled. That's great. But that's like the bare minimum of what you need from Fletcher Cox. And that's not enough. He needs to produce.
And he's not the only one on the D-line. I mean, Barnett needs to produce. Kerrigan, I don't even know if there's any hope for at this point. He just looks like maybe it's the hand injury, but he just kind of looks like a shot fire right now. So it's all of them. Sweat has been okay at times, but, you'd even like to see more from him. That whole group, like you said, Ridgeway has kind of disappeared after the opener. And
Milton Williams, I mean, I know you probably have to temper the expectations, but he hasn't played great.
Yeah, if he's playing 30, 35 snaps, I mean, you'd like to see production there. All those guys. If I had to pick the most disappointing position group on the team, I would say D-line.
And when we came into the season, what do we say about this team? Their D-line and their O-line give them a chance to be a decent team. Their D-line's underperformed, their O-line's been decimated. So,
but we also said that they're old at both spots, and that it was a risk to kind of lean on older guys on both lines, and that's coming back to haunt them.
Yeah, the problem is there wasn't an alternative, because that's just the situation they're in right now. They put themselves in this situation, but that was the situation they were in because they don't have good young talent. And, all of a sudden, I mean, you can pick up little things like what Ryan Kerrigan signing obviously looks like a mistake, but the rest of the guys shouldn't be this bad. Yeah.
And I mean, it's been really, they have a different D-line coach every year, and they underachieve, a lot. They have for a while now. So, it's disappointing.
All right, let's move back to offense. We're kind of ping-ponging back and forth here a little bit, but you wrote a story about Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell, asking some of the questions I think have kind of been in the back of our minds really this week. Why don't you take us through it a little bit?
Yeah, it's 4 games, so the numbers are the numbers, and they can even out. But Miles' touches are down from 17 to 12, 17 per game to 12 per game. His yards from scrimmage are down from 91 to 68. So it's right around the same yards per touch, but obviously his workload has been cut drastically. And Kenny Gainwell, with each week, has gotten more run. And watching that game Sunday, and certainly in the red zone, Gainwell's been great, and Miles has not. But even between the 20s, like in 2 minutes, Gainwell's out there, Miles isn't. You just get the sense that they believe Gainwell's a better fit in this offense. And we all know how talented Miles Sanders is. And it's weird because the things that make Miles, Miles caught 50 balls as a rookie. But Gainwell's a better receiver right now at this point in their careers. Miles isn't a bad, he actually hasn't had any drops. He's caught the ball well, but they just seem to prefer Gainwell in a lot of situations. And over the last 2 weeks, think Miles has only 2 more touches than Gainwell. So you kind of see, the beginnings of what could be a changing of the guard. Now, is it too early to say that because it's only 4 games? Yeah, it is. But I think a lot of people see the way they use Kenny and the situations they use him in, some of the biggest situations for a rookie 5th-round pick to be out there, and a guy who's the fastest to 2,500 scrimmage yards in Eagles history to not be out there. Yeah, that tells you that they seem to favor Kenny Gainwell in a lot of really big situations.
Yeah, I mean, the 2-minute drill, we saw that even back in training camp, and that, at least that makes sense because he's clearly the better pass catcher, and in that 2-minute drill, you need a good pass catcher. I understand what you're saying. I don't know if it'll ever. So you kind of did the sliding scale thing. Miles is down, Gainwell's up. I don't know if it'll ever flip though. Like, I don't know if Gainwell is the type of player who can be like the 1 and Miles the 2. If anything, I think Miles ends up being a 1 and Gainwell's a 1A. And I just look at
a 1.
I mean, yeah, there has to be a 1. Yeah.
Well, if they each get 6 carries or 8 carries, I don't know if there's a 1. I mean, will Miles ever get 20 carries in a game again? I don't know. I would guess no.
Yeah, I don't know if you need to be a 20 carry guy, but there has to be a top back. Like, no matter what the role is, one of them's ahead of the other theoretically. So I just don't know if Gainwell is the type of player they look at and think he can be the running back. If anything, I think he's a part of a rotation. And I say that because of the examples Nick Sirianni used in, San Diego and in Indianapolis with the comparisons to was it Woodhead and Nyheim Hines. Those guys were never the number 1. So if he's looking at Gainwell like those other pieces, then I don't think it's ever going to climb to the point where you don't need another back to play.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a 3 or 4 game stretch where Kenny gets more touches than Miles, because the only way Miles catches like has more touches is if they're both going to catch like 3, 4, 5 balls, 2, 3, 4, whatever. But if they don't run the ball, Miles isn't going to make up the difference, So the only way, like if you run the ball 25 times in a game, Miles will have more touches. But I do think Gainwell's a good runner too, and he's averaging 4.4. He's 2 for 31 in the red zone rushing. He's got 2 carries inside the red zone. They're both touchdowns. The only player in the league who's done that. So in the red zone and a 2-minute, those are 2 pretty significant areas. They do seem to favor Kenny. But I think Miles is a really good player, and like a game like Sunday where I think you really want to run the ball against the Panthers, I think he could be a really good weapon. Now, Miles was 6 for 9 rushing on Sunday against the Chiefs, so some of it kind of.
And going back and watching, I think he did miss some opportunity.
I would agree with that, and I think Gainwell's. I think sometimes Miles tries to do too much. He's looking for the home run, which we know he can hit, but you get that Dave Kingman thing where it's a strikeout or a homer. We see him dancing around a little too much. Gainwell just kind of hits the hole pretty decisively. Now, look, Miles has a hell of a track record. The guy's averaging 4.9 for his career rushing. I think it's 3rd highest in the league among active players with, I forget how many carries, but he's really, really talented. So I just think Nick needs to keep working to find opportunities for Miles and for Gainwell. It's kind of like, we talked about how do you get Ertz and Goddard enough touches? How do you get these 2 running backs enough touches when they don't really run the ball that much? So it's interesting, but if you had to ask me which one of these guys is going to be an Eagle in 2 years, I would guess Kenny Gainwell.
Well, yeah, that's fair, but he's also younger and under contract and cheaper. And
yeah, but also like the notion, if you look at Miles' first 2 seasons and the notion that you wouldn't want to re-sign him, teams don't re-sign running backs generally because they lose their effectiveness pretty quickly when they hit like 28, 27, 28. Miles is 24, 25. He's 25. So I don't think he's at that point. It'll be 27, I guess, it'll be 26 when his contract's up. It's interesting to me. I would love to see them be able to work both of them into the offense, but I'm not sure how you do that when you're running the ball 6 times a game.
Yeah, and I mean, if the offense, at least, the offense performed pretty well against Kansas City. If the offense doesn't perform well, I mean, obviously, it's fewer opportunities, and some of that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're not, the bad play calling leads to fewer chances, but they do have, some balance issues at certain positions. Like, how do you get this guy involved? How do you, how do you get both tight ends involved? How do you scheme up for a guy like Jalen Reagor if that's how you think you need to get him involved? So there's a lot of those types of questions with this team, and some of it's going to be game plan oriented, I would think. Like, you're going to go into a game thinking, okay, this is a Kenny Gainwell game, or this is a Miles Sanders game. So I think we might see some ups and downs with that all year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
All right, let's go through some quick matchups here. Panthers are an interesting team. They're 3-1. To me, it's a little bit of a hollow 3-1. We talked about that with Ray Didinger earlier in the week. Yes, they're 3-1, but they finally played a better team than the Cowboys, and the Cowboys, I thought, beat them pretty good. I know the score ended up being closer, but the Cowboys were in control of that game. First off, what do you make of this Carolina team? Are you kind of with me on that?
Yeah, I mean, they went 3-0, beating one kind of weird team that's inconsistent and 2 bad teams. I do think they're well coached. I think I like their philosophy. I mean, they try to win with defense and running the ball. I mean, they're kind of, I think it was Hargrave who just called them like old fashioned, or might know it was Anthony Harris said they're like really old fashioned the way they play. They just, they want to, time of possession, run the ball, long drives, and play defense and beat you, 17-13, which that's their first few games were low scoring. And then Dallas got them in a shootout, and I'm not sure they're built for that. Although obviously they have a really, really good receiver. Yeah, they're an interesting team, and but I'm not sure I know exactly what they are yet.
Yeah, and they have a lot of reasons that you question that. One of them is Sam Darnold, who's not on the matchups here, but he's playing pretty well. I've always liked Sam Darnold. I feel almost bad for any quarterback that ends up with the Jets. Like, how are you going to succeed there? He has some talent. I really liked him coming out. What was that? 17?
Yeah.
Came out. I liked him then. I still think there's something there. I don't think he's ever going to be a great player, but you can win with him.
Yeah, no, you can. But he, you have to have a running game, and he's the kind of quarterback that he's not going to go out there and put up 42 points on his own. But if you have a defense and run the ball, he's a complimentary player. But I'll tell you what, after facing, Dak and Pat Mahomes, Sam Darnold's going to look awfully human. Like, he's not going to have one of these crazy. So there's going to be opportunities for a pick. There's going to be opportunities for a sack, and they've got to make those plays when those chances are there, because this is ultimately a winnable game. And with the Bucs coming to town again, you never know what's going to happen. And but you lose this one, now you're sitting there looking at 1-5, going out to face the Raiders, who I think they're a little bit of a fraud too. But this first month and a half it's a minefield schedule wise. So plus you have the short week. Alex Singleton even said, short week, the last thing you want to do going into a mini bye is lose 2 games. He's already thinking, these guys always talk one game at a time, but he's like thinking, if we lose 2 games in 5 days, that's really bad. So
yeah, that wouldn't be good.
This is a big game for this team and for this defense too, because it's an offense that's not trying to put up 30 points. They're trying to control the clock and win the game. And I don't think the defense is as bad as it's looked the last 2 weeks. But we'll see Sunday. They've got to play they've got to hold this team to 17 points or less, and 17 to 20 at the most, and give the offense a chance.
Yeah, I mean, the big question going into this game for Carolina is whether or not Christian McCaffrey plays. I think it's pretty well established they're going to run the ball either way, but if he plays, it's a scary proposition for this Eagles defense that's been gashed the last couple of weeks. And I'm in my head, I'm picturing Eric Wilson and Alex Singleton and Jannard Avery trying to cover Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield. Doesn't look pretty.
Yeah, he's so good when he's healthy. I mean, he's just such a playmaker, and just has that ability to just elude people and evade people. And those matchups that you just mentioned are scary. I mean, he might catch 20 balls in that game for 200 yards if he plays. It's a guy. I mean, Matt Rule sounded fairly optimistic, I would think.
Yeah, he said he's hopeful. I don't know what that means. My guess is he's going to come into the weekend list as questionable and probably a game time decision. It's a hamstring, so even if he plays, there's a chance he won't be himself. And you have to be careful with hamstrings, because you can be 85% of the way back, you try to play, and then you got to start over. So they certainly don't want to do that.
That's Sidney Jones' career in a nutshell right there.
Yeah.
5 years of hamstring injuries. What else you got?
Sidney Jones was the Eagles' second-round pick in 2017, if anyone. Panthers, their cornerback situation is interesting. They drafted J.C. Horn. He's hurt. He's out for a while, a broken foot. They traded for C.J. Henderson, a former first-round pick. He's there. And then this week they traded for Stephon Gilmore. Good news for the Eagles. They don't have to worry about the former Defensive Player of the Year. He can't play in this game. They kind of luck out there. He's still on the PUP list. So, and it's weird. If he was released, he could come off of the PUP. But since he was traded, he has to stay on that list. So the Eagles will miss him. So because of that, I think Devontae Smith, coming off what was a really good game last week, has a chance to do some damage here.
Yeah, I think it's a matchup that really favors him. And, you can just see the chemistry between Hurts and Devontae growing each week. I mean, what we saw from Hurts and Devontae, when's the last time we saw that from a young quarterback and receiver around here? I mean, just where when the
11 and J-Matt.
Who was it?
11 and Jordan Matthews.
Yeah, I guess.
I'm being a little facetious, but that was.
Yeah, probably. You're probably. Although really, Jordan. I mean, 14 and 15 were Jordan's bigger years. So
that's true.
But in any case, yeah, it's been a while. But it's kind of deal where when the ball was heading toward Devontae, you just felt like he was going to find a way to catch it, and we just haven't felt that in so long. And yeah, as far as Gilmore, I think the rule is that if you're waived, all your lists, all your statuses evaporate. Mm-hmm. But if you're traded and your contract, everything it's a clean slate. If you're traded, all that stuff comes with you. So if you're on PUP, you stay on a PUP. If you're on IR, I guess you can get traded if you're on IR. If your contract stays, your statuses stay, all that stuff. So they really did catch a break there with Gilmore. But you'd like to see Devontae really build on what he did Sunday. It's been a long time since we saw that kind of wide receiver play and that kind of chemistry. So it was really, really encouraging.
Yeah. The next one is, we talked about the Eagles' offensive line situation, especially at the tackle position. The Panthers have a couple good edge rushers. Our old friend Hassan Reddick from Temple and Brian Burns, who are off to a pretty good start in his career. I think he had 8 sacks his first year, 9 sacks his second year. I think he's up to 3 through 4 games. Reddick has 4.5. And they flip sides a lot. So it's not even like you can get comfortable. There are some teams that really rush one guy from one side, one guy from the other. These guys really flip back and forth. So whether it's Mailata and Dillard or Driscoll and Mailata or Driscoll, whatever it is, They're going to see both of them, and they're pretty good.
Yeah, and Shaq Thompson's not playing, but he's hurt. But yeah, and it's this is Mailata, assuming Mailata plays. His second career start at right tackle, and Dillard has been okay, but you kind of hold your breath a little bit with him, and those are tough challenges. I really like Reddick. I love his game, relentless player. So they've got to neutralize those guys. They got to find a way to do it.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy because they, in Arizona, they tried him out as a linebacker, and he was one of those players coming out of college where it's like he can play anything, but you got to figure out where you're playing him. And they tried him at linebacker first, then that he was clearly a better edge rusher, and now he's full-time rusher, which is where he belongs, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, the whole O-line is such a storyline, just because every week it's going to be changing. I mean, I'm sure whatever they start Sunday is not going to be what they start against the Buccaneers on Thursday, just because something's going to happen.
Yeah, is there more of a chance because it's a short week that it is going to be the same?
I guess so, but nothing would sort of like Nate Herbig could join the Navy and retire. I mean, nothing would surprise me at this point, because I mean, this is what do we say, 14, 17?
You said 18 and 20.
18 and 20. It's actually, I believe it's 17 and 20. But anyway, yeah, they're both really quality rushers, and interesting challenge there for the Eagles tackles. Yep.
Do you think Darius Slay might travel with DJ Moore?
There's no reason not to, and this is the kind of textbook time when your top corner should, because I mean the gap between him and their other receivers is so big, so and the gap between Slay and the Eagles' other corners is so big. So yeah, there's no reason not to, and that'll be big. I mean, he's really good. I mean, he's he doesn't kind of get the notoriety of other top receivers, but he's one of the better ones in the league, and he's off to a great start. He's averaging like 100 yards a game, right? What's he got?
Yeah, he's off to a great start.
Yeah, 398 yards. So he's actually averaging 98.5, 99.5. But anyway, yeah, that'll be a fun matchup to watch. And Slay likes, he's been. And by the way, Darius Slay missed practice on Thursday for personal reasons, the dreaded personal reasons. So it's something to keep an eye on. Hopefully he's back Friday, but who knows? Certainly something to keep an eye on, because without him, now you're looking at Steve Nelson covering DJ Moore and Maddox playing outside, and you have all kinds of issues. So certainly keep an eye on that.
What do you think they do? Do you think if they needed another corner, my guess would be Avante would play outside in base and then move inside and nickel, and you'd have the other guy outside, and probably Zach McPherson.
Would have to be Zach McPherson, yeah. That's not ideal.
No, it's certainly not ideal. And the last one isn't really a matchup, but it's just something to think about. Jalen Hurts, the Eagles obviously picked him with the 53rd pick. The other guy who they thought about picking in that spot is on the other sideline, Jeremy Chin, who's off to a really good start in his career. And it just got me thinking, how different would this team and this franchise be right now if they chose Chin over Hurts? And I don't know if they'd be better or worse, but it'd be different.
Yeah. In fact, Hurts might be starting for the Panthers against the Eagles Sunday. Chin's really good. I kind of thought they might take him, but they don't really take defensive players in the early rounds, in the first 2 rounds, certainly. So, yeah, he's really good and good young, certainly a good young safety, one of the better ones in the league. And Hurts, I mean, the one thing we talked about, he played so well against the Chiefs, but the one thing that's eluded him so far in his career is that consistency. So, yeah, you want to see him put together a string of really good games, and that's the next challenge for him. When he can do that, I wrote a column about Hurts and just kind of capsulizing his first 4 games, which I think have been overall positive. And somebody said, well, why aren't you ready to anoint him as the guy yet, because I'm not. And I said, well, he's got to do it every week. He's got to be consistent. Maybe not every week. Every quarterback's going to have a bad game here and there, but until he can string together, a series of efficient, mistake-free, productive games, it's too early for me to anoint him anything. So like what I see, but do it over a period of weeks, and then I'll really be impressed.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's normally the biggest thing for a young quarterback, is finding consistency in this league. And I agree with you. It's not just the consistency too. It's consistency doing things that good quarterbacks do, if that makes sense. It's not just, Sirianni has a great game plan this week, he makes you look good. It's, you have to be able to make NFL throws all the time, and he needs to do that consistently.
What do you like best about him?
About Hurts?
Yeah.
About him or about his game?
Either.
Because about him, I mean, I'm just really impressed by him as a person, as a leader, and I don't want to make that seem like that's all he's got, because he certainly does good things on the field, but that's the striking thing about him to me, more so than his play. And I don't know what that means, but that's what comes to mind first.
And I think they're related. I think he's a guy that's never going to be satisfied. He's never going to be content, and that drives him. I loved when he came out after the Chiefs game. He just put up 30 points and thrown for 387 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers, completed 66%, I think 67% of his passes, and was asked about his best game ever. He's like, we lost. He was like incredulous. I was like, we lost. We lost the game. We lost. I appreciate that, instead of sitting up there saying, I love my stats and all that. So, it's going to be an interesting matchup for him.
On the field, it's honestly his legs and his escapability.
Yeah. I do think he's grown. I mean, you're talking about a guy who completed 52% of his passes last year. He's at 66 this year. That's pretty significant growth. I like that. There's not a lot of, he's not putting the ball in harm's way for the most part. He's maybe a little too conservative at times with, underneath stuff.
I think there has to be a better in between, but
yeah, I would agree with that. But I think he's getting there. I think he's getting toward that, and I think that's the next step for him. Hey, at Nissan, we just made your choice for a new car an easier one than ever with our most exciting and fuel-efficient lineup. The choice is yours, and get great offers across our full line. Shop your local Nissan store today at nissanusa.com.
We saw a giant praying mantis today.
Yeah, let me see if I can do this. This seemed to work last time. Let me see if I can.
You're gonna pull up the photo.
Yeah.
Is it still?
And
so if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. If you're listening, you have to take our word for it. It was a big praying mantis. Is this still legal to kill them? I remember that being a big thing when I was a kid.
See, now this is compared
Ben
to
says
the door.
yes. Ben says it's illegal to kill them.
Really? Dave,
I know that was a thing.
They've killed this one, so I'm gonna.
I did not kill it.
I'm gonna call the NovaCare Complex security and let them know Dave murdered a praying mantis.
I did not. That praying mantis is starting at right guard this week, and they're gonna go. All right, you got anything else before we wrap this up?
No, should be a fun game. Looking forward to it. And short week. I would assume they'll be off Monday, practice Tuesday, off Wednesday, and go Thursday. So
maybe that's a good thing, not to think too much about Brady come to town.
It could be.
All right. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button there and subscribe there as well. Do the stuff. You guys know the drill. That's it. For Reuben, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye presented by Nissan. We'll talk to you after the game on Sunday.